Hello, friends, and welcome back to another episode of the Game Theory Podcast. This is episode 93, and since we have a guest, we're not going to be doing the intro, news, and reviews. We're going straight into the meat of things. David, how are you, buddy?
So good. Welcome back.
Thank you. Yes, I was in Atlanta. Great weather down there, man. So good.
Better than Mississippi?
It's hard to get better than this, but if you can believe it, yes. I ran the Peachtree Road Race. It was a 10K, which is 6.2 miles, and it was raining the entire time, like cats and dogs. So good. So good. Worth it. Worth it. But that's not what we're talking about. We have a very special guest, Shaun Penrod, on this week. Shaun, what's going on, man?
Hey, what's up, everybody? Thanks for having me.
Yes, so tell us who you are and why people should listen to your face.
It's a very nice-looking face. That's one reason. But, no, yeah, so I'm Shaun Penrod, and let's see, I live out in California, so my weather might be a little bit better than both of your guys' combined. But
I don't know. It's like in the 90s, right?
Yeah, okay, that is true. We're
Been in the low 70s all week for me.
It's been getting pretty hot over here. I live just north of LA, so it's not as nice as down in San Diego, but whatever. Let's see. Married, 2 wonderful kids, so I do the whole family life thing. So I always love when you share those little insights, Jeremiah, because I'm always like, I'm going to try that on my children.
Yes.
And,
manipulate my children into good behavior.
Pretty good. Other than that, I'm a huge Magic the Gathering fan, so I love the game. I've just started playing competitively recently and started up my own little site trying to improve myself and help others improve as well.
Okay, so David, I remember growing up, you were big into Magic the Gathering, you and Tim. Did you and Shaun play together ever? Aren't you guys like kind of distantly related?
Yeah, well, we were kind of neighbors in college. Like we were in
That's what it was.
the apartments like across the hall from each other. But I don't know. By that point, I had stopped collecting cards. Like I was big in during the revised and 4th edition kind of days. That's kind of when my heyday was back in the old days.
Yeah, back in the day.
I remember I had 4 Sarah Angels I was super proud of, and but by the time I got to college, I don't know if I even brought my cards with me. I don't know, John, did we ever play?
No, so that's the thing is no, we didn't. And Sarah Angel, that's pretty funny because that's a really iconic card, but it's actually like not that good. But they are reprinting it in Magic Origins. Comes out next week. They are actually reprinting it. So that's pretty cool. I played back with. I started back in Tempest and Weatherlight, like that whole storyline, which is really cool. And I was probably like 12, 13. Lived in Northern California, and then when we moved away from Northern California, I kind of fell out of it, and I didn't play for years. And those years included my time in college. So I actually didn't play much, in college. And so you and I just did a bunch of role-playing games. We just did Star Wars and
Star Wars Saga Edition.
Yeah. Didn't play Magic with you. And then,
Oh, what got you into Magic amongst all the games that are available to us as kids?
say that again.
I was just wondering what got you into Magic. Like, if of all the games that we could play as kids, what was it about Magic that pulled you in?
Let's see. So a friend introduced me to it, like I said, when I was like 12 or 13, something like that. I don't know. It was just a new game, you know. I hadn't played a game with cards. It's the first collectible card game, so there wasn't anything like it out there. And so it was just, I don't know, it just captures the imagination because, like I said, Sarah Angel is pretty iconic. So you have dragons and angels and spells that you cast. It's just, fun new game, and it was just, I just got the Magic bug. It was fun getting new cards, collecting them, and building decks that probably sucked, but you just had fun playing with your friends. So I don't know. And this social aspect, that's probably why I fell out of it when I moved away from California, was because I didn't have any more friends that played. Now I'll play, now I go to stores and I can make friends there, but when you're like a teenager, it didn't really cross my mind. So that's what got me, was the newness of it, and just it's a fun way to hang out with friends.
You talk about the iconicness of it. Like once you started playing, that's when they made the shift into telling stories with their sets. It used to be just like, all right, it's 4th edition, it's revised, it's antiquities. There wasn't really a story. It was just, here's some cards. And then like they started introducing main characters. You started getting like heroes and villains, and so like it got to be more storytelling. And I've actually heard of people who take role-playing games. Like let's say we all want to play D&D. Like the 3 of us were going to sit down and play a game of Dungeons and Dragons, and some people will actually take a deck of Magic cards and you'll just shuffle them out, and everybody gets like 3 cards, and you have to tie all 3 of those cards into your backstory. So you might get like Plague Rats and Sarah Angel and Visinger Vampire or something, and you're like, okay, so there was a plague that wiped out my village or whatever. You'd like incorporate something from each of that artwork
Cool.
or the name of the card or something.
Yeah,
So
that's something that Wizards has done a brilliant job with, especially as of recently, is that story and just capturing it. Like one of my favorite sets a couple of years ago was Innistrad, which was the Gothic horror set, and they really captured angels and vampires and werewolves and all kinds of just classic zombies and just classic iconic Gothic horror. So they do a really good job with the storytelling now, for sure.
Now, when we started our game theory podcast, you were one of the first people I called because I was like, "Yeah, Shaun's a gamer. He'll wanna know about this." So, tell me about the origin of your podcast. What's it called? What's it about? Why did you decide to start it?
Sure. So it's MTG Pro Tutor, and that's the URL as well, mtgprotutor.com. And the reason why I started, so I love. All right, so I guess the long story is I love like business, right? And so like I'm really into business, and I really want to do something that I can provide for my family from home when I get out. I'm currently active duty Navy, and so when I get out, I want to be able to work from home. And everyone always says, "Oh, hey, you should combine your passion with your business," because here's the thing, like it doesn't matter what you do, what venture you do, you're always going to hit a dip. You're always going to hit that wall. You're always going to get that slump. And if you don't love what you do, then that slump is gonna take you out of the game, And so like people who do things around something that they're passionate about, they stick with it through thick and thin, pretty much. And so the long roundabout way is eventually I decided to start the site MTG Pro Tutor, just because I wanted to try building a website, and I wanted to do it around something that I like. So that when I hit those hard spots, I'd be able to push through it. And I originally started doing videos, so I did a video every single day where I would open up a booster pack and evaluate the cards inside and just try and make that my thing. Hey, I'm going to open up a video every day. And that didn't really get the traction that I was hoping that it would. It didn't really take off or whatever. And so then I started learning about podcasts, and obviously I learn a lot of things by listening to podcasts, and then I'll obviously always listen to your guys' podcasts and stuff, and I'm like, hey, I want to try this podcast thing as well. And so I again started learning about podcasts and how to do it, and fired it up, and I said, I would love to learn from the pros. I would love to ask professional Magic players questions and learn how they do what they do and how they think and things like that. And I figured that might be a pretty interesting premise for a show, and I'm sure other people would like to hear how the pros play. And so I decided to interview professional Magic the Gathering players and then put up the interviews as a podcast. So that's what I do. We're 3 weeks in, and I've interviewed pros. So what I do is I look for people who have top 8 at a Pro Tour or have won a Grand Prix, because those are the big tournaments within the Magic the Gathering space. And so if you want a Grand Prix or you top 8 at a Pro Tour, then I want to talk to you. And I just have them on, and I ask questions about their origin stories, how they started, what their favorite card or favorite set, just kind of get to know you type stuff. And then I dive into what's the biggest mistake that you see players make and how can we avoid it, and things like that, so that we can really get actionable tips to improve the next time we sit down and play. So that's kind of the long drawn out where I got the idea and why I'm doing it and what I'm doing with it.
That's pretty awesome. I know I listen to actually I watch a lot of Twitch streams, and then I listen to podcasts, and I always make sure that sometimes you have to skip, your life like catches this kind of busy cycle, you aren't able to get all of the podcasts listened to, and I never skip the ones with the pro players of any game I'm into, because that's like the most fascinating part, to get inside their heads and figure out, especially I don't have an equivalent of Magic the Gathering other than Hearthstone, which is kind of like a more casual version. And but I love to hear whenever they draft for arenas, what they're thinking, and as they go along, there's a lot of thinking involved. So very cool.
And that's kind of what's gotten me. So I got back into Magic a couple years ago when I moved to San Diego. A friend of mine they're helping us move in, and they saw all of our boxes of board games, because my wife and I would just do tons of board games. He's like, "Oh, hey, you play games too?" And so we connected with them, and then when we were playing, I learned that he still played Magic, with his brother and stuff like that. So he got me back into it, and that's kind of what's kept me since I've gotten back into it, is the thinking that you mentioned, because I love how the game starts before you even sit down to play. You know, the game starts when you're looking at all these cards, deciding what cards to put in your deck and how to build your deck, and then you sit down and you play, and it's me against you, and let's see, let's see who's going to come out conquer. So I love the thinking. I love all the lines of play, and like, all right, if you do this, then what do I do, and what's the correct thing to do? And so, yeah, I definitely, and that's why I think it's useful to hear from and talk to pros, because they just have much more experience and are much better at those scenarios where it requires a lot of thinking. So.
Yeah, it really feels like 60% of the game is won before you even sit down sometimes, just by the kinds of decisions you make opening up the packs.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I love that metagame version. That's something that you don't get a whole lot, except like for example, StarCraft 2 is something that I played on, not a competitive level like pro, but like I played competitively. And a lot of my play had to do with, if I had played the guy on ladder before, I thought, oh, this is the guy who did this strategy, and I would try to outthink him before, as the load screen's happening. I'm sitting there like kind of rubbing my chin, thinking, how could I hit him at his weak points and really build myself to be impervious to assault. So I've noticed that, like in Hearthstone, for example, when I play friendly games against other people, I'll think about how to counter whatever they're playing, So it's interesting.
Yeah, and that's, exact same thing. So you'll see obviously different types of decks, and so especially when you start playing at your local game store and you play the same people, it'll be like, okay, this guy plays this kind of deck and so forth. But yeah, with a different, if you have a certain, like a control deck or an aggressive deck or whatever, and you play another type of deck, then you already have to go through those lines of play. Be like, okay, so I'm expecting him, to play a bunch of small, fast creatures, so I'm going to have to be prepared to do this. And so, yeah, I love that. I love that you have to be prepared to kind of answer, many types of different situations in a short amount of time, because, you roll around, you play 3 or 4 rounds in the course of a couple hours, and so you have to really be flexible. So it's a lot of fun.
Like Scar saying in Lion King, be prepared. It's important. Jeremy Irons in a musical. Nobody thought they'd hear it, but it happened.
Now, what color are you all about? Like, do you have a favorite color? Like, for me in high school, I was all about green. I like to do the big, huge monsters. I like to try and get them out really fast with, like, elves and the, land grab cards, and then just like, wow, 4th turn, here's the Craw Giant, now what? Like, what kind of color really appeals to you, or does it just depend on the situation?
Yeah, so right now I'm playing a red, white, and blue deck.
4th of July.
America. I love America. No. So the reason why was because so I just started playing, like I said, competitively recently, and what kind of got me into it was I read this article with this guy who had a red, white, and blue deck that had this infinite combo in it, and I was like, that is the coolest thing I've ever seen. I have to do that. And so I went out and got all the pieces that I needed to build this deck. And I played it for a couple weeks, and I liked it. It was really fun. It was actually pretty complicated, and so for it being like my first competitive deck, I probably should have gone with something a little more simple. But I got all the pieces for this red, white, and blue deck, especially the lands that I needed. And so now that I have all these red, white, and blue lands, I've just kind of kept with those colors, so I wouldn't have to go out and invest in a totally different color deck. However, in a different format called Modern, I am going to be using my friend's green elves deck. So I don't know, more than a color, I just like to see decks that have a fun like strategy to them, or obviously ones that put up results I would like to play as well, but basically if they have something neat or some kind of fun synergy that I can exploit, then I like to play that color. Not so much if it doesn't. I know people who, I don't play anything that doesn't have red in it or whatever, which is cool because you really get to familiarize yourself with that color and get to know it pretty well. I haven't really zeroed in on, I don't play this or I only play that. Right now, I just kind of want to play whatever is winning, so then I can kind of practice with different styles. So.
See, I was always big into the story, but even before Magic had a story, I would make up stories about it. I'm like, okay, this is what's going on. This is why these creatures are in play. So I always look for theme decks. Like, okay, yeah. I'm playing Slivers because Slivers remind me of the Zerg. So I'm like, all these different Slivers are coming out and they're getting stronger and there's synergistic energy. Or I'd play this is the Merfolk deck. This is the Goblin King deck. Like I just love finding this kind of role-playing theme to kind of make a story out of and just go there. It wasn't always the best strategy, but when you're playing around a junior high table, it's not have to have a professional deck.
Yeah, and you can do that with lots of things. Like I've heard of somebody who built a Wizard of Oz deck, So they just went through. They found like a scarecrow. They
Are
found
there
like
flying monkeys?
yeah, oh, yeah. So they'll do stuff like that. They'll find something in the picture or something in the card that represents something. And so I've heard of Wizard of Oz decks. I've heard of just different things like that. When my sister visited me, like she went through and she looked at all these. She went through all my cards and took out all the pictures that reminded her of something from like a Disney movie. And so she wanted to just do like oh, this person looks like Rapunzel or whatever, and it could just be some random blonde chick in a card, but she just kind of likes doing that. So it's really fun. There's so many different ways you can play, just casually, kitchen table magic like that, all the way up to the competitive ranks. So it's just something for everybody.
I sometimes in Hearthstone I would make it decks like based off silly stuff like that, and one of them I made the man deck, and then every time I played it I would try to make puns, like I was like, this play is mandatory, and it would make like the pictures on the card had to be like the most heroic, like manly picture ever. Like if he's eating meat, that's going in there. Like if he's doing like lifting weight of some kind, that's going in there. And so like it wasn't a great deck, but man, it was hilarious because I'd always pull it out like when you do, that's fantastic. Oh man, the reason to play this card is manifold. But anyway, we'd make puns after every play, and it was just those decks are really fun. I was wondering about this. So I got into I guess you'd call it trade card. I don't know, collectible card games for Hearthstone, which like I said is kind of the Blizzard kind of introductory version of that. Something I noticed was that people started doing something called net decking. And that was like where they would, you're playing the game and you're like, man, I'm trying to tweak this thing, and I've got the wonkiest Frankenstein deck. I need to figure out how to slim this, and tweak it down and like really streamline it to what I'm trying to do. So then people would Google it, and then they just go pick whatever deck a pro last played, because they usually play like online and filmed. And I was wondering about that. There seems to be I was wondering if that happened a lot during Magic the Gathering years, considering I know it started before the internet got big.
So that definitely happens all the time right now. Like that definitely is a thing. Like I said, I read that article about that deck that had the combo. That I was like, oh, I want to try that because that guy, he placed really well, or he won a big tournament he was in with that particular deck. And so I was like, oh my gosh, like this deck is it's a winning deck, so I want to play it. But it also comes down to the player. You can have the best deck, or you can have the deck that won a big tournament or whatever. But if you don't have the experience, you don't know how to pilot it, then you're still not going to do really well. And I don't think there's anything wrong with net decking or just seeing what's big, because I mean it won for a reason, and then it's kind of like a jumping off point for you to kind of say, okay, well, why did it win? Like what makes this good? What makes this deck good against the other styles of deck? And then now, because we have the internet, we can do Twitch and we can do all these other we have all these other resources where we can watch the pros and see how they played it and try and figure out why they played it that way and things like that. And so I think it's a great learning tool. It's a great way because now you don't have to figure out everything on your own. You have this, you have the collective knowledge of the internet to see what decks are good and what's not good or whatever. It's always fun to make your own, obviously, but when you go to more competitive level tournaments, I mean, you can't be so naive to think that you're the one that's going to break the format, that you're going to be the one that finds out. You stumbled across this one deck that no one else has heard of that is just going to trash everybody. Some people do, but it's very few and far between that happens. So I think net decking is a great way for people to just kind of understand the format better.
Yeah, one thing you talk a lot about on your show is the idea of finding a friend who's more experienced and learning from them, like getting a guru. So with people like Jeremiah, people who haven't played Magic the Gathering but have played Hearthstone, because it's a pretty popular game now. It's kind of exploded. What advice would you have for them if they enjoy collectible card games and they want to, like, I don't want to say graduate, but step onto a different kind of CCG that might be more complex? Like how would they adjust from beginner to more of a serious Magic player if they want to get into that?
So definitely, to touch on what you just mentioned, finding somebody else who plays. So if you have any friends that play Magic, definitely ask them to kind of just to play with you. Basically, by putting a bunch of repetitions with somebody who is better than you is how you're going to improve. And so if you're starting from like scratch, like all you've ever done is play Hearthstone, you're like, hey, I like this card game thing, I like to play in real life, and you don't have anything, then hopefully you have a friend who plays Magic. If not, then go to a local game store. Like you can go to the Wizards site, you put in your zip code, and it'll pop up a store near you, and there'll probably be several stores near you. You just go to a couple of them, find the one that you like, the most, that feels the most, I guess, friendly or whatever. And then again, this if you're starting with from scratch with nothing, you can talk to the store owner. Store owners are always really grateful to share their knowledge and kind of get people into Magic, obviously, because it's a big product for them. But then there'll always be people there that are playing, and then you can just sit down and watch people. And as you start going frequently to the store and you kind of recognize who are there regularly, it'll be very apparent pretty quickly who the good player is. Like when I just moved here to LA and I started going to my game store, within a couple weeks, it was very apparent who the best player was because he won almost every Friday Night Magic and stuff like that. And so then you just start talking to them, just start asking them questions, or say, hey, would you look at my deck? And the Magic community is very friendly. They've done a really good job about just not being intimidating, and the people, at least in my experience, whenever I go and ask questions, they're always very willing to talk and share because we're all in this Magic thing together, and we all love it and love talking about it. So say, hey, would you look at my deck? And they'll look at it, they'll make suggestions, things like that. And that's the best way to start, is find somebody in person that you can connect with and talk with. The next step would be, there's tons of articles and stuff like that and videos that you can consume online. And that's a great way to really kind of up your knowledge. But I think the best way is just talking to somebody in person. I have a friend that we get together 2 or 3 times a week, and we just play. We'll play standard, we'll play modern, and we'll just test different decks out, or we'll try the same deck with different strategies, things like that, and then talk about it. And that's really beneficial because you get that feedback from somebody that also wants to improve. So that's what I would say: is find a store, find a friend or make a friend there, and then just ask questions and be willing to accept criticism. That's a big thing, because you might have your pet deck, but then you have to be willing to have somebody say, well, this isn't good, and here's why, and maybe you should change this. And that's fine. I mean, your deck might be a fun deck for the kitchen table, like we were talking about, but if you really want to improve, just be open. Just be open to criticism.
So you want to go out, you want to whip out your deck and to strangers and have them talk about it.
Yep. Do that.
Just kidding. I was making a pun on sometimes people make the sounds of deck. Okay, never mind. Yeah, no, that's pretty good. I like that. I also wish I like the idea that like Hearthstone, you start out right away online, and I know there's a Magic Gathering online as well, but you kind of jump right into the big leagues, and I kind of wish there was kind of a little me and my friends get together and try to make something work, because then you get a lot more like silliness you can kind of get out of your veins, and you can kind of grow together without getting just raffle stomped, like over a series of games. It seems more approachable that way.
You mean for online?
Well, just in general. I mean, like, I like the win rate to be nice and smooth, over time, like, rather than like just get wrecked, and then you slowly get better.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, I agree, because it's very discouraging when you just play and lose all the time. That's how I play. That's how I felt when I played like Team Fortress 2, when I got into it and just died over and over. Like, I'm like, this isn't fun. I don't like dying all the time. And you just have to, my brother and my cousin wanted me to play, and so I would just put in hours of constant dying until finally I, died a little bit less. And now I'm not like good or anything, but at least I didn't die all the time. And so yeah, when you sit down with a new game, if you lose all the time, then it can be discouraging. So that's why it's good to kind of start with people who because then you're more likely to play. Because if you get stomped by strangers all the time, then you're like, oh, I'm not going to go back to that store. Everybody kills me, So that's why I think it's really important to have a friend. So hopefully someone that you know personally. If not, then go make a friend, and then you'll kind of encourage each other to move on.
Or just get your wife and do it. She's crazy competitive. She'll raffle stomp you at home.
Yeah, I guess Jeremiah might have that benefit, but Caitlin's a big gamer. Like, we love games, stuff like that, but she just doesn't have an interest in Magic. And she's cool and supportive, and she doesn't mind when I hang out with friends and play, or when I go and play. But she doesn't really have an interest in learning how to play. But she does help me sort my cards, so I'm very grateful that she at least helped me do that. So she's a trooper.
Now, one of the reasons I stopped playing was because the cost. It just became too expensive to keep up. Every time they come out with a new set, I'd have to buy new cards, because there was a little bit of power creep. I don't know if that's still a problem, but back in the day, it's like, oh man, look at all these cards are slightly better than the ones you had. Buy a new set. So for a new player, like if they want to stay like competitive enough to where they don't just get stomped every time they go to the game store, how much money would you say would have to invest in this game? Like all hobbies have a cost.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah. And Magic is probably higher up there. I would say, especially for people who want to stay current in it. How much? Let's see. Like if you were starting from like nothing and you just wanted to build a deck that you wanted to go and play with. So it depends on the format. I'll say that.
Mm-hmm.
So standard is any card from the sets that came out in the last 2 years, right? And so that one is obviously constantly rotating. So every time they come up with a new set and the old set rotates out, you're gonna have to get new cards to keep it current. So that's gonna have like a constant kind of churn as far as money goes. Now there's modern, which is a much larger pool, but the decks stay a little more consistent because whenever a new set comes out, there might be a couple cards that affect modern, and so if people want a deck that kind of is competitive and stays more or less consistent, then you can get into modern. Now, getting into modern is a kind of expensive, but then once you've built your deck, then you just kind of need to do a few cards here and there as new sets come out to kind of tweak it. And so there's some modern decks that are $200, and there's some modern decks that are a little less, and some that are a lot more. So if you have absolutely nothing, I would say probably start by again making a friend and borrowing cards, because all Magic players have like a ton of extra cards, and so if you're willing to like share your pool kind of with somebody, like lend and borrow, things like that, then you can break into some of these formats for a lot less. If you wanted to just go and play and have a good time, there is a format called Draft or Sealed, where you just go and you spend, it's usually $15, and you get to sit down at a table with 7 other players, and everybody opens up a pack, they pick one card, and then they pass the pack around, and you just keep doing that, picking one card at a time until everyone has opened up 3 packs. And so that's kind of neat because it's only $15 to do, and then you get to keep the cards that you get at the end. And so sometimes you get to open up cards that are worth more than $15, and so you paid for your event right there. And then with those cards, you can trade with other people, you can sell it back to the store, then buy the cards that you want. And so there's ways to kind of creep into it, and without it being like a ginormous upfront cost. But if somebody just says, "Hey, I have absolutely no cards at all, and I want to get into Magic," and they just want to like front load their set, their collection, then it's going to be a lot of money. So yeah, it just depends on what format you want to break into.
There's different levels depending on what you want to spend.
Yeah, exactly.
I think
and again, if you just want to get into the game casually with your friends, they have starter decks. So you go and you spend $30 or whatever, you get a starter deck and a couple booster packs, and then from that point you just start getting a card here, getting a card there, and you just kind of that's the best way to just kind of break into it. Just go get a starter deck and just kind of start playing with your friends. If you want to get in again competitively, then it's going to be more expensive. But if you just want to get into it to get a feel for it, then there's lots of cheaper price points that you can get in.
And I think we're still getting a little bit of feedback. I don't know if you have a headset or something, but there's a little bit of echo on your side, I think.
All right, let me see if I can fix that.
Okay. Meanwhile, David. So what got you into Magic the Gathering, David?
It's just everybody, Tim was playing it. All my friends were kind of into it. Jimmy Jackson was big into it, and so I was like, yeah, sure, I'll try it out. I'm open to peer pressure, and I ended up you get like this initial rush. I remember one of the things I liked about the game was that I would find like I'd open up a pack. Oh, Baron Senju, that's like a cool looking card. And it turns out he's really rare. And this was kind of when the internet was still kind of nascent. And so we had this magazine. I forget what it was called, but it had like all the cards and like listed like how much they were worth. And so you'd like find the card that you found and be like, oh, I'm so excited, because there's always like statistically there'd be at least one rare card in every booster pack. And so there's always something to kind of like get you excited about. And for me, that was part of the fun, was just trying to track down like the things you need to make your deck work. Like, this was before net decking was possible, but you'd have like an idea, like, oh, I want to have a lot of big creatures with a lot of a lot of small creatures. You come up with an idea for a deck, and then it was just about like finding those cards, and you'd have all your friends and you'd trade, and there was this whole wheeling and dealing thing, like, I'll trade you a white knight for your protection from red, circle of protection red, or whatever. Like, we had no idea what we were doing, but we were just making deals. And I don't know, I'm actually interested, Shaun, in how that's changed now that the internet's become a bigger thing with eBay and Amazon, and like it must be a lot easier to find like specific cards you want now.
It may be working.
I'm back.
Okay. Hey.
All right, I'm back. Hopefully that's
Thanks.
better.
Yes. So
I'll
we were
get the
just
buff.
talking about the thrill of the hunt, like finding cards that are like you want for your deck, but you don't know where to find. And I remember when I was like when the internet was just not quite a big thing yet, we would just be limited to like the local card stores, each other, just blind draws out of booster packs. Like, is it easier now to like say like, okay, I really want Baron Senger for my vampire army. How do I find him?
Yeah, so you still have that. Like whenever I'm looking for a card, the first thing I always do is ask my friends if they have it because it's much easier, or you get a better value if you trade to your friends for it or whatever. But then there's 3 stores in my area, and so I'll drive around and I'll look and see if they're there or whatever, and so that thrill's still there. I rarely will just open up a booster pack to try and find the card that I need because obviously the chances of you getting it is very slim, and so if I'm going to spend $4 on a booster pack, then that's $4 I could have just spent to buy the one card that I need, you know. But yeah, so we still drive around to stores and see if it's there, and then if none of our stores have it, then thankfully we have the internet and you get to go online, and obviously that's a little less exciting, but at least you get what you want.
Yeah, it really feels like it appeals to that primal hunter-gatherer kind of. I don't know if that's just a Homo sapien thing, but you're like, oh, I'm looking for it, found the rare, got it.
Yeah, exactly. It's fun.
That's fun. I was also wondering if I wonder if like back in the day before again eBay and whatnot, if any of the like as you're trading with your friends and you start to understand what like if David was trading with me and then over time I'm like, oh, I think he's building some kind of like giant things deck. If there's at any point you're like, no, that guy always beats me with that deck. No, I'm not going to trade you that last one, and they just hold on to it, or they make you like trade in way more than what it's worth. But I guess with the internet now, it's a little less of a threat because they can just be like, fine, I'll just go on eBay.
Yeah, that was the original concept behind Magic. When Richard Garfield made it, he envisioned people having their group of friends that they played with, and that was kind of the pool of cards that you had was between yours and your friend group or whatever. I don't know, David, you remember back in the day they used to have ante, which they don't do anymore because it turns out people hate losing their own cards. But the idea was that was how you shifted cards within your card pool. So you and your buddies you always play, and then when you lose your ante card or whatever, now it's in your friend's deck, and you have to figure out how you can get it back or how you can beat it or whatever. So that was kind of the idea behind it. Was he did not envision it kind of people just going nuts over it and being willing to go out and just buying ridiculous amounts of cards just to get the ones that they need. And so the dynamic of the game has kind of shifted over the last, obviously, 21 years. But that was kind of the original idea, was that you and your friends kind of had the card pool that you played with, and the thrill of the hunt and getting something unique that no one had seen before and using it against them has always been appealing in Magic.
Now, have you gotten into other CCGs like Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Pokemon or Hearthstone or Star Wars?
Yeah, so I never did Pokemon. My younger brother did, and I cringed because he would just make terrible trades. But he was like 7, so I was like, whatever. You could. Yu-Gi-Oh! I've played with people, but I never got into it. I don't know. I just, not that I'm like above it. I just never got into it. I did do the Star Wars CCG when that was out forever ago. That was pretty cool. They did try and do a Wheel of Time card game for a while, so I have several Wheel of Time cards. That never took off either, but that was fun because those were really hard to get because not a lot of people did it. And so I remember a site that you met other people that you wanted to trade with, and I would mail cards to like Sweden, and then somebody would send me cards back and stuff. It was crazy. And then recently, let's see, I do a little bit of you're right. I do a little bit of Hearthstone. And it's fun. I basically make sure I get to level 20 every month, so I get the new card back. And but beyond that, I just kind of play casually. So I don't know, like. Oh, and I did. Let's see. My brother and I, we did. So when we were younger, we tried pretty much everything new that came out. So we did BattleTech. There was a BattleTech card game. There was a Dune card game that we tried. Babylon 5. There was a Babylon 5 card game that we tried. So my brother and I, we tried a little bit of everything, and I don't know, just. None of them had this kind of intuitive, streamlined kind of simplicity. It's weird because Magic, while simple, is complex. It's kind of a little mix of both, obviously. And none of those other games really had that same appeal that Magic did. And so I think that's why people 21 years later are still playing Magic. So.
I feel like too that the game has become simpler than it was. Like I've been kind of keeping up with it over the computer game. You know, they always come out with a computer game that has all the new cards in it, and so I play that.
Yes.
And I noticed a lot of the abilities, like that used to be just like a paragraph of text back in third revised edition, are now just like they have a word. It's like, you know, this guy is this kind of thing, and then you're like, oh, okay, that's a lot easier than having a whole paragraph there. Like I don't know, it just seems like it's less intimidating now than it used to be.
Yeah, Wizards. So, oh man, I listened to a podcast called Drive to Work with Mark Rosewater. He's the head designer for
Oh
Magic
yeah,
the
it's just
Gathering.
him going to work and talking on the phone while he drives.
Yes, and it's really really good. And he talks about a lot of these things. He talks about the history of Magic and design and all these different things. And he has mentioned that several times that that is a conscious effort that they have made over at Wizards. They're very dialed into their audience base, and they understand that for a game to thrive and to continue, you need to constantly have new players. And if the game, but you also need to engage your experienced players, because if it stays the same and it's too simple, then experienced players are going to get bored and leave. But if it's too complex, you're not going to get the new players. And so and so they're very mindful of that. And so they've done exactly what you said, where they would simplify. Basically, they'll simplify things at the common level. So now commons are much more simple to understand, because a lot of beginner players, that's the majority of cards that you're going to see are commons. And then they'll add higher complexity at the uncommon, the rare, and the mythic rare, so that and that's what keeps the more experienced players engaged, because you'll see a card that may seem simple, but if you're an experienced player, you'll understand kind of its interactions and the complexities that you can use it in different scenarios and things like that. And so they look for keywords, like you said. Instead of saying this creature does not tap during attacking, they just turn that into vigilance, right? So they'll add these keywords because they understand that the complexity takes up mental space, and they're like, the less mental space that we take up, like the easier things are going to be to understand, the more likely they are to stick around, and then the more areas you can explore. Because if we squish things down to one word, vigilance, flying, first strike, things like that, then once people understand what those words mean, then we have all this other space, physically on the card, and then also mentally in people's heads, to do other things and explore other areas and make the game more challenging for both beginners and advanced players.
It's interesting that they put it that way. That actually has to do with psychology, where experts actually just automate processes. So like, let's say you're playing like, I don't know, like Hearthstone, like or because that's my only. I'm not a Magic player. I missed that boat entirely. I did play some Star Wars back in the day, but I had like just crap cards. I thought they were good. They're not. But like as you're like, experts will just like crunch things down basically into like small like placeholders, because like as you go throughout your day, for example, the first time you brush your teeth, you have to deliberately think of backstrokes, forward strokes, where I'm getting on my tooth. But eventually, as you grow up a little bit, after maybe a couple weeks of that, pretty soon the back and forth is automated, but where you're brushing is not. And then over time, it's like, oh, this side is automated, but then when I switch, I'm all weird with this, and then pretty soon it's just all automated. And so like that saves mental space, as you say, or your working memory. Like you have more space to think. So that's why people say they're often not present in the moment. You're not in the bathroom all by yourself, thinking about everything. You're usually thinking about what you're going to do next, what you're going to do with your day, etc., because you've already automated that process. And like experts can kind of crunch down those big paragraphs into kind of about the space a word would take inside of your mind as well. So it does really help streamline it for simple people without making it, I always say, artificially complex. Like League of Legends, it's complex, but it's clearly artificially complex. It doesn't need to be that complex. And so I like that they're doing that. It makes it easy for noobs like me to be able to play it, but also to understand why a pro would play that card whenever they play it. I get to kind of reflect on it and think and say, oh, I see. Oh, that's cool. Whereas I might be lost on both the short term and watching pros if it was just a big paragraph of text. So I like that. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Now, collectible card games are their own genre, and they're pretty popular, but have you ever played, they're not collectible card games, but they're deck building games. So in other words, there's not rares, there's not mythics, there's nothing like that, but they do have the thrill of putting a deck together, but you have a more limited pool. Like I'm thinking of a game like Dominion, for example, where you're all working with the same cards, but you're just kind of putting your own strategies together with a deck building aspect and then playing.
Yeah, I love those kinds of games, and so there's also another. So I do want to talk about that, but there's also another style of card game called an LCG, which is a living card game. And the Game of Thrones, for example, their card game is an LCG, and the difference is in an LCG, the booster packs have like set cards in it, so you know exactly what you're going to get, as opposed to a collectible card game where the booster packs are random. You know you're going to get 10 uncommons. You know you're going to get 10 commons, 3 uncommons, and 1 rare in a land, but you don't know which one of those you're going to get. As opposed to an LCG, a living card game, where hey, this booster pack is going to have these 3 cards, these 4 cards, and these 3 cards, and you know exactly what you're going to get. And the reason why people started making LCGs was because the rares in Magic, for example, in the secondary market can get really expensive, like 20, 30, 40, like however much dollars for a single card. And so people are like, hey, well, the reason why that is because supply, demand, scarcity, all that stuff. And so if they make a booster pack that you know exactly what you're going to get, then you can go and you can buy the booster pack, you get the cards exactly that you need, and then you play the game normally. I've never played Game of Thrones, but you build your deck and you play your game and move on with life. But yes, that's kind of the other step. Now the deck building card games, those are a lot of fun. I have played Dominion. I like that one a lot. One of my favorite deck building card games is Legendary. That's absolutely one of my favorites for sure.
What does that mean? What is
those are so deck building. So you use cards to get other cards. So for example, I'll use Legendary because that's the one that I play with the most. Legendary, it's set in the Marvel universe, and so your starter deck, every player has a few cards in their deck that basically some are fight cards and some are recruiting cards. And you use when you draw your hand, you play your recruiting cards, and you use those cards to recruit heroes. So you can get Spider-Man or Thor or Iron Man or whatever. And when you recruit that hero into your deck, you add that card to your deck, and when your deck runs out, you shuffle it up, and when you draw your new hand, now you have the chance of drawing the Iron Man that you just bought. And when you play Iron Man, he has either fight or recruiting points that you can then use to either fight bad guys or recruit more heroes. And deck building games is all about finding synergies between cards, whether it's Dominion, whether it's Legendary, whether it's anything like that. You usually find synergies between cards, and you have to balance. Getting certain cards for your deck and getting too many, like thinning. You have to balance getting cards in your deck that are good, but then if you get too many of one card, then you don't draw them as often and things like that. And so that's kind of how deck building card games work, and it's just a different style of play, and I really like them. I think they're a lot of fun. I think they really help people see connections between cards, and that can carry over to a lot of different games and a lot of different aspects in life.
Crazy. Wait, so Sentinels of the Multiverse, that falls under none of these?
Yeah, so you're not really building a deck in Sentinels of the Multiverse. It's a cooperative card game. I don't know, is Legendary cooperative, or are you playing against each other?
Legendary is cooperative, so it's
Okay.
you versus the board, and and so you have these villains that are appearing from the villain deck. They just kind of flip up and they go through the city wreaking havoc, and you're trying to fight the villains before they complete their master scheme and all this stuff. So it's pretty cool.
Okay, so it sounds like Sentinels of the Multiverse, except for Sentinels, you just have a deck. Each hero has their own deck, and it doesn't change throughout the game.
Okay, cool, very cool.
That's interesting. Okay. Huh. So, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was just wondering if you'd gain, so you interview pros on your podcast. Have you gained any insight or improved your play significantly since that?
So I just started, so I haven't improved significantly, but I have definitely pulled out some really good stuff, like just like the value of. I mean, I knew it was important, but to hear the pros reiterate the value of surrounding yourself with people that are better than you. Like that's almost all of them have talked about how that's a great way to improve. And then also being more conscious about your play. Like a lot of them talk about having a plan. Like a lot of people, they'll sit down, they'll play, they draw their hand, they're just doing stuff, and then they kind of pass the turn and let's see what my opponent's going to do, and then we'll react to that. As opposed to like thinking your turn all the way through and having a plan, and really, because if you don't have a plan, like you're just going to be playing whatever you draw and not really thinking about where you're going. But if you really know what's in your deck and you really know what your plan for winning is, then you know, okay, when I draw this, here's what I need to do, and here's how I can do it. And that also goes into really paying attention to what your opponent is doing, and instead of just reacting to them, like trying to anticipate it. And that's obviously easier said than done, but it's really interesting to hear all these pros talk about that and how just having a plan through every single turn is crucial. And so I'm really looking forward to making a conscious effort to put that into play or put that into practice when I play until it becomes habit, like you were talking about with brushing the teeth. Because these guys, they do it automatically, but me, I'll have to like, all right, I really need to think about what am I going to do this turn. How do I think that's going to affect my opponent, and then what I'm going to do in response to that. And so I'm really excited to move forward and see improvement as I put these things into practice.
Yeah, I've seen this cool like kind of split between, it's not a hard split obviously like anything, it's kind of dimensional, but the cool split between like how the pros think before they play a card or otherwise, like if they know they're playing a certain deck, like they're like, oh, this is Control Mage in Hearthstone, and they say like, okay, they try to bait out certain cards that they're pretty sure is in the other guy's deck and stuff. That just seems like such next level stuff that that's really awesome to hear, to see people play and then hear them as they think through it. So that's pretty cool. Do they do like, do they show like tournaments on the internet and then like cast it? Like they have people like kind of shoutcasting it?
Yes. So Magic the Gathering coverage is a big part of the community. So every big tournament they'll have like pretty much professional like coverage guys that they pay to go there, and they'll cover the tournaments, and they'll have cameras above each table, and you can see them. You can see these players play, and you have commentators talking about the different plays and things like that. So at the big tournaments, you definitely have that going on, and then in addition to that, similar to Hearthstone, you have people who they will stream their draft or they'll stream their game on Twitch or whatever when they go and they play Magic Online, and that. Actually, some of the pros have talked about how that's a really good way to improve is by watching these pros or watching other people play and thinking, because the ones online, they'll be able to kind of talk through their decisions and things like that. But when you're watching the big tournaments and stuff like that, you're not hearing the pros, you're hearing the commentators. But you can kind of go through it too, be like, okay, you can see what's in their hand, and you can kind of say, well, why are they doing that? And really kind of go through the mental energy of trying to figure out why they're doing what they're doing, and then apply that to your game. Because it takes work, right? You have to focus, you have to think about it, and but by putting in that work that other people don't, then that's where you're going to get that little edge over your opponent the next time you sit down.
That's encouraging to hear. There's a part of me that my wife and I used to watch Hearthstone tournaments. We'd order, like if there was a big one, we're nerds. We'd put it on the big screen and like order like hot wings and then just sit there and eat and like talk through the plays. And because you see him play something crazy like in the first couple hands, like something that normally most people will play like in the end, and I'm like, why would he play that? And then you and the announcers kind of get to try to figure it out together. So I really enjoy that portion of card games, determining what's going on.
Yeah, same thing. Same thing happens in Magic, like, and it's really cool. So you're watching, like, okay, like why did he do that? What's he thinking? Yeah. So that's really neat to see that. And for some of the bigger events in Magic, you actually get to see both sides. So which might take away a little bit of the exercise on your end because you can see, oh man, these other guys are going to do that. But you kind of get to play both sides and be like, okay, well, why did he do this, and then why did she do that, and kind of flip back and forth and try and figure it out. So it's a lot of fun.
That's cool. What's the other one? Man, I was thinking about which portion? Oh yeah. Like I remember there was a guy. To me at least, it seems pretty evident whenever people. I love these people who come in and they're just like an enigma. They come in and they've got the weirdest deck ever. Like they clearly haven't been paying attention to the meta, and if they have, then they clearly don't care about it. And there's a guy like that who I think he was, this is armchair diagnosis here, so I'm probably wrong, but a little autistic. And he comes in from France, and he just like sits down. And he's clearly got like a twitch, like he seems a little awkward. But the guy just killed it. He just ruined it because his cards had the evolution of his cards, like this natural evolution of him like taking cards in and putting them out without paying attention to anything besides how the performance rate of that specific deck. He came in and destroyed like a local tournament to the point where he made the world championships, and he didn't win, but I always think that's interesting to see these like it's almost like watching a virus mutate. Like you'll find this one little virus that's weird, but most of them have like a typical subset that they're working towards. So I imagine that probably happens occasionally in Magic the Gathering as well. Like these.
Yeah. So and that's really cool. Yeah. So I just interviewed Conley Woods the other day, and he talked about he loves deck building. Like, that's his favorite thing, and so he's one of the ones that will show up to a bigger tournament with with maybe a deck that isn't your standard like top level deck list or whatever. And he says sometimes it doesn't work out, and sometimes it does. But that's some people, they just love that challenge. They love putting their own thing together, and that takes a lot of skill in looking. Well, and so he does it. He does look at the metagame and try and figure out what he can do to kind of break it. Obviously, as opposed to just showing it with something janky and hoping it works. But sometimes it is these decks from left field that kind of take off and take over, and then it's left to everybody else to kind of be like, what? And they have to figure out how to beat it. And then the next weekend when the tournament rolls around, you'll see a lot of people playing that janky deck that won, and then you'll see a lot of people that are positioned to beat it because they're like, okay, well, I saw that deck win, so I know a lot of people are going to play that, so I'm going to build something that can beat that, and so, yeah, there's a lot of that goes on in Magic for sure.
Cool.
That's fun.
Well, how would people find you, or your website, or your show? How would they follow if they want to get into Magic the Gathering and they're like, okay, I'm ready. We're gonna try something new. Let's do this.
Sure. So
one first step would be to find MTG Pro Tutor.
Yeah. So it's mtgprotutor.com is the URL, and then the podcast is on iTunes. So you can always do search for MTG Pro Tutor in iTunes, or in Stitcher. It's on Stitcher, and then whatever app you use. If you're a Droid user like me, you can just do a search for it in whatever app you use to play podcasts, because it pops up in all those directories as well. And that would be the best way, is just to. You can also connect with me on Twitter. I'm really good with chatting it up on Twitter. I share some quotes and tips and stuff like that on Twitter, and when people ask questions, I always love engaging with people there. And so @Shaun Penrod is my handle there on Twitter. So SHAUN and then PENROD. And you'll see my bright smiley face there, so pretty easy to recognize. mtgprotutor.com, and then @Shaun Penrod on Twitter, and then check the show out on iTunes or wherever it is that you listen to podcasts.
Cool. That'll be good. I know that we got a few pretty hardcore Magic the Gathering players, because whenever we did the collectible card games version, and I was just talking about Hearthstone because that's all I knew, people were like, "What are you doing?"
I remember. I do remember that. That was pretty fun.
I know nobody was picking up my Magic references.
No, that's sad.
I caught them,
but
for what it's worth.
Yay.
Well, cool. All right. Well, do you think that probably wraps up this episode?
Yeah, unless there's any last-minute advice or tips you want to give, Shaun?
Let's see.
What is the coolest thing you've learned from an interview thus far?
Let's see. That's a good question. The coolest thing. So I mean, this doesn't really apply to people's like games or whatever, but it's cool learning their favorite cards, because I guess I was expecting some really iconic like powerhouse cards, which one guy did say a really iconic powerhouse card, but people. Yeah, well, no, like no one said that one, but from the 4 that I've done, like they're just like two people have said some really like weird. I'm like, what? And I go look it up because I'm not familiar with it, and it's like some common from like some set forever ago. I'm like, what? So that was just really kind of the most interesting thing, was just to hear some of their favorite cards and why. But I think the coolest thing that I learned was, don't be so focused on trying to prove to others that you're good, right? Focus on improving yourself. If you just focus on playing the best game that you can and improving yourself as a player, rather than trying to prove to people, hey, I am a good player, if you just kind of turn the focus inward and just focus on, how can I improve, what am I doing wrong, and how can I fix it, then as you turn your focus inward as a player, then that recognition will come if that's something that you're looking for. Like as you focus on improving yourself, then your skill, you get better and better, and you get noticed more and more, because you'll start placing, you'll be noticed in your store, and then you'll start placing at tournaments and things like that. And so if your goal is to kind of go a little further in Magic than others will, don't so much focus on that as focus on as turning the focus inward and just trying to improve yourself as a player. And I thought that was really sage advice that was actually from my first guest, Patrick Chapin, and he did a really good job in illustrating how he struggled with that at the beginning, and once he turned it in, he was able to kind of not worry so much about trying to impress other people, and that's when he really started to pick up and improve as a player.
So just become a good player instead of trying to prove that you're a good player.
Right.
Makes sense. That makes you more open to criticism too, which is a hard thing for a lot of us competitive types.
Yes, absolutely.
I feel like one of the hardest things I've learned in well, I did this in competitive gaming in StarCraft. I mean, because you know how frustrating StarCraft can be. David, for sure, you know. They designed it to be a 50% win rate. Whenever you're a gamer and you're used to winning 100% of the time, single player, you know, it can be frustrating. Or if you play multiplayer, a lot of times you just get thrown in with noobs, and so you just wreck face if you're good. But with this, one of the things I slowly learned, like over time, just from beating it into me, because I came kicking and screaming. I am not a Zen master, but eventually I got it. I was like, wait, I'm playing to learn. I'm not playing to win. So if I win, it almost, especially well, and like stomp someone, it almost feels like cheating. And so I've carried that over into Here's the Storm, and when I get raffle stomped, I'm like, okay, let's see what I can learn from this.
Go back and watch the replays and try and make it a learning moment instead of just a humiliating defeat.
Yeah, and it's helped in real life too. Yeah,
that's really good. I like that. Summing it up again, you know, smaller mental space. Play to learn, don't play to win. I think that's a really good takeaway for anybody in any game. But absolutely, it holds true in Magic.
Oh, well, heck, if I said something smart, then we should probably leave right now before I screw it up.
And then a high note.
Well, great. It was great having you on, Shaun. I know you've been on the show for a little bit. We even played that Star Wars RPG and put up as bonus episodes, I think, last summer. So it's great to have you on again, and I'll see what I can do about tuning into your podcast, even though I'm awful at Magic. But anyone who's actually interested in getting really good at Magic, then there's where you go. So, well, thanks for coming on.
Thanks so much for having me on, guys. Yeah, it was a blast.
All right.
I'm going to go buy Legendary, like right now.
All right, well, take care, guys. We'll talk to you next week.